A grey New York City morning draped itself over the city like an old coat. Mary Smith climbed the marble steps of the immense glass tower housing Miller and King Consulting, feeling her heart beat faster and faster. She was 21 years old, her hair tied back with a dollar store scrunchie, and in her hands she clutched a plastic folder from a supermarket. Inside was her resume, 2 modestly filled pages listing temporary jobs, cleaning offices, working the counter at a fast food place, wrapping gifts at the mall before Christmas. When she walked into the reception area, she felt like an ant in a cathedral. The marble floors gleamed like a mirror, and behind the glass walls figures in elegant suits drifted past. A receptionist wearing pearl earrings glanced at her over her glasses and pointed to the chairs in the waiting area. "Please wait with the other candidates," she said, her tone condescending as if speaking to a child. 5 other women were already seated in the waiting area. All of them wore navy blue blazers, carried leather handbags, and sported discreet heels. Their portfolios were as thick as phone books. Mary sat on the edge of her chair, feeling their eyes judging her simple blouse and skirt from a clearance rack at Target. "Did you go to Stern?" one of the candidates asked, a girl with flawless makeup. "No." Mary felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "A community college business program." The silence that followed was louder than a shout. One of the women covered her mouth with her hand as if stifling a laugh. Mary tucked her folder more tightly under her arm and stared down at her sneakers, the only clean pair she owned. 10 minutes later, the doors swung open with a whoosh. The HR director, Dr. Alexander King, entered, a slim man in his 50s, wearing a navy blue suit that cost a few $1,000s. His eyes were as cold as a New York winter, and his smile was artificially polite. "Good morning, ladies," he said, collecting their portfolios. When he got to Mary, he picked up her plastic folder and paused. He opened it, scanned the 2 pages, and then looked up at the other candidates. "Well, ladies, we have a curiosity here," he announced, holding Mary's resume up like an exhibit. "Can any of you write something shorter? I think a blank page might have more substance." The candidates tittered. One of them, a tall brunette, said, "Maybe it's some kind of experiment, a test of our sense of humor." Mary felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to run, but something inside her told her to stay. She lifted her head and looked Dr. King straight in the eye. "Sir, my resume may be short, but every single entry on it was a real job, not an internship arranged by my parents' friends." Dr. King raised an eyebrow, surprised. A hush fell over the room. The other candidates exchanged glances. Did this girl from the outer boroughs really just talk back? At that moment, the doors opened again. A tall man in a grey suit entered, around 40, with sharp features and steel grey eyes. It was Henry Miller, the owner of the firm, a legend in the New York business world. His presence made even Dr. King straighten his back like a soldier. "Alexander, what's going on here?" Henry asked in a low, calm voice. "We're just evaluating the candidates, Mr. Miller. This young woman," Dr. King waved Mary's resume, "has very minimalist experience." Henry walked closer and looked at Mary. For a moment their eyes met. His gaze was assessing but without contempt. "I see," he said slowly. Then he turned to all the candidates. "We're changing the plan. Instead of interviews, we're having a practical test. You have 30 minutes to prepare a proposal." The candidates looked at each other, unsettled. "What's the assignment, Mr. Miller?" the perfect brunette asked. "Simple. You need to increase the efficiency of a small neighborhood deli. The owner is barely making ends meet. What's your advice?" The other women immediately reached for their notebooks, calculators, and phones. They started sketching charts, calculating metrics, and discussing SWOT analyses and market segmentation. Mary sat in silence, closing her eyes. An image of Joe's Corner Deli in Queens flashed in her mind, the place where her mother sometimes helped out. Short, perpetually tired Joe, trying to serve 5 tables at once. Customers waiting 15 minutes for a coffee, shelves with prices written in chalk that no one read, regulars leaving because the service was too slow. Mary opened her eyes and started to write. Not about metrics, but about people. After 30 minutes, each candidate presented her proposal. The first spoke of cost optimization and market research, the second of modern payment systems and mobile apps, the third of rebranding and marketing campaigns. Then it was Mary's turn. She stood up, her knees trembling. "A deli is about people, not numbers," she began quietly. "On the first day, I'd rearrange the tables so the owner has a shorter path between them. The second day, I'd teach him to always ask, 'Anything else with that?' when someone orders just a coffee. The third day, simple printed signs with today's specials, not chalk signs." Dr. King rolled his eyes. "That's not a business strategy, that's housekeeping advice." But Henry Miller was listening intently. "Go on," he said to Mary. "In the evenings, I'd create a quiet hour, from 6 to 7, cheaper coffee for senior citizens. They have time, they like to talk, they'll order a second piece of cake. And on weekends, and maybe a buy one get one free coffee for couples. People come for the feeling, not just the coffee." The room was silent. The candidate stared at her as if she were a museum exhibit. Dr. King scowled. "Mr. Miller, this is all very charming, but where are the concrete numbers? Where's the profitability analysis?" Henry stood and walked to the window. For a moment he looked down at the streets of New York, at the small cafes below, at the people rushing to work. "You can hire someone to run the numbers," he said finally. "You can't hire someone to understand people." He turned and looked at all the candidates. "You all know the theory, she knows the practice." He pointed at Mary. "The job goes to Miss Smith." A wave of shock went through the room. Dr. King's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. The candidates looked at each other in disbelief. Had this millionaire really just chosen a girl from the projects over graduates from the best universities? Mary felt her legs shaking. Was this a dream? Had she really just gotten a job at the best consulting firm in the country? Henry walked over to her and extended his hand. "You start Monday, 8 a.m. As the other candidates filed out of the room, Mary could hear their whispers. "This has to be a joke. My father is going to hear about this, that they're hiring people off the street. She probably won't last a month." But Mary wasn't listening anymore. For the first time in her life, someone had seen more in her than a lack of experience. Someone had seen solutions where others only saw problems. As she was leaving the building, Dr. King caught up with her in the lobby. "Ms. Smith," he said quietly but sharply, "don't think this is over. This is just the beginning. There's no room for pity in this company. One mistake, and you're out." Mary looked him straight in the eye. "I understand, Dr. King, but I'm not asking for pity. I'm just asking for a chance." Dr. King walked away without another word, but Mary saw something more than contempt in his eyes. She saw fear. Fear that this 20-something girl from a low-income apartment building might turn out to be better than all his pedigreed protégés. When Mary stepped out onto the street, the rain no longer seemed so cold. For the first time in her life, she wasn't going home defeated. She was walking as someone who had been given a chance, and she had no intention of wasting it. Chapter 2. Monday morning came too quickly. Mary stood in front of the mirror in the small bathroom of the Queen's apartment she shared with her mother. Her best blouse, white, ironed the night before, looked modest but clean. Her mother, Christine, sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee from a thick mug. "Honey, remember, don't let them get to you," she said softly. "They think money makes a person, but it's the heart that makes a person." Mary kissed her mother on the cheek. The scent of her drugstore perfume mingled with the smell of fresh toast. These were the most important scents in her world. At 7:30, she was standing at the entrance to the office tower. The receptionist, the same one from Friday, looked at her with surprise. "Oh, it's you. I thought that was a joke," she said, handing her a temporary access card. "12th floor development department. Ms. Beatrice Thompson will get you started." Mary's heart beat faster. Beatrice Thompson, the same girl who had laughed at her resume. The elevator carried her upward like a scene from a dream. On the 12th floor, Beatrice was already waiting. In her mid-20s, with blonde hair styled at the best salon in Manhattan, she wore a perfectly tailored blazer. Her smile was icily polite. "Welcome, Mary," she said with false warmth. "I'm Beatrice, daughter of Mr. Thompson from the board of directors. I'll be mentoring you." That last word landed like a stone in a well. Beatrice led her through bright corridors filled with people in suits, all speaking English into their phones. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee from a $20,000 espresso machine. "This will be your desk," Beatrice said, pointing to the smallest workstation in the corner right next to the photocopier, a very prestigious spot, close to the action. On the desk was a stack of documents the thickness of a book and a sticky note. "Prepare a summary by tomorrow, BT. These are the reports from all departments for the last month," Beatrice explained sweetly. "You need to review them, summarize them, and prepare a presentation. Only the best interns get to make presentations. It's a great honor." Mary looked at the pile of paper. It looked like at least 10 hours of work. "Due by when?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, of course. 9 a.m. Beatrice's smile widened. "Oh, and one more thing. These are very important documents. If anything doesn't add up, you'll be the one responsible. Understand?" Mary nodded. She understood all too well. This was a trap. As Beatrice walked away, her heels clicking like hammers on the floor, Mary sat down at her desk and picked up the first document. Numbers, tables, charts, all written in a corporate language they didn't teach in community college. but numbers were universal. And Mary had been helping her mother with the household budget since she was a kid. After an hour of work, she noticed something strange. Some of the totals didn't add up. The marketing department's report was missing 3 line items, but they were included in the summary. In the HR department, training costs were listed twice in different places. Were these mistakes? Or maybe having trouble? An older man in a worn sweater stood behind her. He was about 60, with silver hair and kind eyes behind his glasses. "Good morning," Mary stood up quickly. "I'm just checking these reports." "Stanley Williams," he introduced himself. "Archivist. I've been here for 20 years. He glanced at the documents. "Ah, the monthly reports. Beatrice is testing someone new again." Mary didn't know what to say. Mr. Williams smiled sadly. "You see errors in those numbers, don't you?" "Of course you do. They're there on purpose." "On purpose?" "Beatrice always does this with new interns. She gives them documents with mistakes. If they copy them without checking, they're sloppy. If they find the mistakes and correct them, they're overstepping and challenging authority." There's no right answer. Mary felt a cold knot in her stomach. "So what should I do?" Mr. Williams looked around and leaned in closer. "My advice? Find the errors, but in your report just write potential discrepancies to be discussed with the relevant departments. That way you show you're attentive, but you're not attacking anyone." Just then, Beatrice walked past the desk with a group of young employees. "Yes, that's the one from the interview," she was saying, intentionally loud. "Apparently, the CEO has a soft spot for charity cases. So noble, isn't it?" One of the men chuckled. "How long do you think she'll last?" "I'd give her a week, maybe 2 if she's nice to me." Mary clenched her hands on the keyboard. Mr. Williams placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't listen to them," he whispered. "They do this to everyone who's different. But remember, they know you have something they lack. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so scared." For the rest of the day, Mary worked with intense focus. She checked every number, cross-referenced sources, and made notes. By 7 in the evening, the office was empty. Only she, the cleaning lady, Mrs. Sophia, and a security guard remained. Mrs. Sophia, a woman in her 60s wearing a blue smock, stopped by her desk. "Staying so late on your first day?" she asked with concern. "I have to finish this assignment," Mary said, glancing at the clock. "It's due tomorrow morning. Have you eaten anything?" Only then did Mary feel the hunger. In her rush, she had forgotten to pack a sandwich. There. Sophia disappeared for 5 minutes and returned with a thermos of hot soup and a slice of bread. "Here, from my home. Chicken noodle. You can't work on an empty stomach." Mary felt tears well up in her eyes. In this cold glass and marble world, she had found a second kind heart. At 11 p.m. she finished the report, 30 pages of carefully prepared analysis. Every error was marked gently but precisely. At the end, she added the note, "Potential discrepancies require consultation with the relevant departments. I suggest a meeting to establish the correct data." The next day at 9 a.m., her report was on Dr. King's desk. Mary waited anxiously, watching his face as he read. Dr. King furrowed his brow, turned the pages, and made notes. Finally, he looked up. "How did you know about these discrepancies?" "I checked every line item against the source documents," she answered calmly. Dr. King stood up and disappeared for 5 minutes. When he returned, his expression was even more severe. "I spoke with the departments. There were, in fact, errors. Serious errors." Mary felt her heart pound. "Does that mean—" "It means you saved the company from major embarrassment at a meeting with investors. This report was supposed to go directly to the board." At that moment, Henry Miller walked into the office. "I heard we had a small crisis," he said, looking at Dr. King. "No, Mr. Miller, we have a crisis averted. Ms. Smith detected errors that could have cost us a contract." Henry looked at Mary. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that might have been respect. "How did you do it?" "I checked everything twice," she answered simply. "My mother always said, trust but verify." Henry almost smiled. "Almost. Good. Starting tomorrow, you'll be working directly with my team." Dr. King went pale. "But Mr. Miller, she's just an intern. She's an intern who just saved us a multi-million-dollar contract." Henry cut him off. "I think she's earned a promotion." As they left the office, Mary saw Beatrice standing by the coffee machine. Her face was as white as the wall. She had clearly overheard the entire conversation. "Congratulations," she said through clenched teeth. "But remember, this was just the first day. I hope you're ready for what comes next." Mary felt a chill in her stomach, but she answered calmly, "I'm ready to work. That's what I came here for." Beatrice walked away without a word, but Mary saw something dangerous in her eyes. It wasn't a war yet, but the terms of engagement had just been declared. That evening, riding the bus home through a crowded New York City, Mary thought about what had happened. In a single day, she had saved the company, earned the respect of the CEO, and made an enemy. This was just the beginning of the real test. Chapter 3. Henry's team was located on the 15th floor, in a glass-walled conference room with a view of the Hudson River. When Mary walked in on her second day of work, she found 5 people hunched over their laptops. They all looked up at her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "This is Mary Smith," Henry introduced her. "She's joining the project team. Yesterday, she saved us from a serious mistake." The oldest of the group, a woman in her 40s wearing an elegant suit, extended her hand. "Eve Peterson, project manager," she said with a smile that seemed genuine. "I heard about your success. Congratulations." The others introduced themselves one by one. Thomas, a young analyst from NYU, Maggie, a communications specialist, Peter, a programmer, and Michael, a lawyer. They were all polite and professional, but Mary felt a distance. She was a foreign object in a perfectly calibrated machine. "We're working on a restructuring project for a chain of grocery stores," Eve explained. "Mr. Miller thinks a fresh perspective might help us." For the next few hours, Mary listened as the team analyzed sales metrics, profit margins, and supply chain optimizations. The language was technical, full of business jargon. She felt like she was in a lecture for a language she didn't speak. But then, Thomas showed a map of the stores that were struggling. Mary recognized a few of the streets. They were in her neighborhood. "That store on Rembelinska Street is always empty," she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "You've been there?" Thomas asked. "I live nearby. The owner, Mr. Joe, is a good man, but, well, the store looks like it's stuck in the 70s. It's dark, the shelves are too high for older people, and there are no benches outside, and a lot of retirees live in that neighborhood." Eve leaned forward with interest. "What would you change?" "The lighting, definitely the lighting, and maybe move the bread shelves closer to the entrance because that's the first thing people look for. And in the summer, maybe an awning with a bench out front, so the elderly can sit down with their groceries." Maggie was scribbling notes furiously. "Those are very specific observations," she admitted, "but are they profitable?" "I don't know if they're profitable," Mary answered honestly, "but I know that Mr. Joe is making so little right now that he sometimes has to buy inventory on credit, and those elderly people are his most loyal customers. If they feel comfortable, they'll come every day." Henry listened with growing interest. That afternoon, he invited Mary for a private conversation. "You have a different perspective," he said, standing by the window. "The team sees numbers. You see people." "That's because I'm one of those people," she replied without hesitation. For the first time, she saw a genuine smile on his face. But that same day, when she returned from lunch, there was an envelope on her desk. Inside was a note that read, "Maybe you should stick to working retail. It's more your level." Mary looked around the office. Beatrice was at her desk, pretending to read emails, but the corners of her mouth twitched with a suppressed smile. The next day, it happened again. This time, the note read, "Some people were born for elegant offices. Others were born to clean them." Mary decided not to react, but on the third day, when she found a printout on her desk highlighting errors in one of her previous tasks, errors that someone had deliberately inserted into her file, she knew the war had begun. That evening, after everyone had left, she stayed in the office. She had to prepare an analysis for the next day. She was working by the light of a single desk lamp when she heard footsteps in the hallway. It was Mr. Williams with a cart full of old archives. "Staying late again?" he asked with concern. "I have to catch up," she explained, her voice tired. Mr. Williams parked his cart and sat in the chair next to her. "You know, Mary, I worked in this company when Mr. Miller was a young engineer from a small town near Boston. He didn't have any connections either. It also seemed like he didn't fit in. What happened? He turned out to be the best they'd ever seen here. But for the first 2 years, everyone was waiting for him to fail. Some even helped him along the way." Mr. Williams stood up and went to an archive cabinet. He pulled out a thin file. "These are the real reports from last month," he said quietly. "The ones you were given were copies with altered data. Beatrice does this every time." Mary opened the file. The numbers were different. They were real. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you remind me of my daughter," he answered honestly. She also had dreams bigger than her background. She also had to fight people who thought her place was somewhere else. What happened to her? Mr. Williams smiled sadly. "She became a doctor, the best pediatrician in Cleveland. But first she had to prove that a girl from a small town could treat children just as well as the daughters of professors." The next morning, Mary came in prepared. Her analysis was perfect, based on the real data. As she presented her findings to Henry's team, She saw Eve nod in approval and Thomas take notes, but then Dr. King entered with a copy of her report and a grave expression. "Mrs. Smith, I've received reports that there may have been some irregularities in your work." "What kind of irregularities?" Henry asked sharply. "Apparently, someone saw Ms. Smith in the archives after hours, unsupervised. That's a violation of security protocol." Mary felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Someone had been watching her. Someone knew about Mr. Williams's help. "That's true," she said loudly. "I was in the archives." Dr. King smiled triumphantly. "Exactly. That's a serious—" "I asked Mr. Williams to show me how to verify data," Mary finished. "I wanted to learn how to do my analyses more accurately." Henry looked at her intently. And I discovered that the documents I was given to analyze contained errors, deliberate errors. The silence in the room was as thick as fog. "What kind of errors?" Henry asked in a low voice. Mary opened her folder and laid both sets of documents on the table, the ones with errors and the real ones from the archives. "These numbers are different. Someone changed the data in the documents I was supposed to analyze." Dr. King turned pale. That's impossible. Who would—" At that moment, Mr. Williams entered the room with another file. "Pardon the interruption," he said politely, "but I was instructed to bring the originals of these reports, just in case." Henry compared the documents. His face hardened with each passing minute. "Alexander," he said finally to Dr. King, "who had access to these documents before they were given to Ms. Smith?" Dr. King was silent, but his gaze involuntarily drifted toward Beatrice's desk. Henry nodded. "I see. I want an explanation immediately." When they were alone, Mary turned to Mr. Williams. "Why did you do that? I could get in trouble for this." Mr. Williams smiled warmly. "Because sometimes you have to show the truth, even if it's risky. Besides, that wasn't the only file I brought today." A glint of determination shone in his eyes. Chapter 4. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the office grew as thick as the air before a thunderstorm. Beatrice avoided Mary, but her glances were filled with cold fury. Dr. King maintained an icy politeness, but he double-checked every task he gave Mary, as if searching for a mistake. Mary was now working directly with Henry's team on the project for the grocery store chain. Every morning she received assignments from Eve Peterson, who proved to be a fair but demanding boss. "We need an analysis of customer behavior in neighborhood stores," she said one Wednesday morning. "We have the statistical data, but we're missing the human perspective." Mary nodded, but inside she felt a knot of anxiety. She was the only one on the team without a business degree. How was she supposed to compete with analysts from top universities? That day after work, she decided to go to Queens, to Mr. Joe's store. She wanted to see for herself what she was supposed to be writing about. Joe's Corner Deli was exactly as she remembered it. Dark, cramped, with shelves reaching to the ceiling. Mr. Joe, a 60-year-old man in a stretched-out sweater, stood behind the counter counting change. "Mary," he said, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Haven't seen you in a while. How's it going at that big company?" "It's going well, Mr. Joe. I'm actually working on a project about stores just like yours." Mr. Joe sighed heavily. "They probably figured out there's nothing left to save. Too many of these big box stores now. People drive there on the weekends and buy groceries for the whole week." Mary looked around the store. An elderly woman with a small basket sat in the corner, waiting patiently for Mr. Joe to finish his conversation. A young man in work clothes stood by the milk fridge, probably on his way home from a night shift. "Mr. Joe, could I stay here for an hour? I just want to observe." Mr. Joe looked at her, surprised, but agreed. Mary sat on a plastic chair behind the counter and began to watch. In 1 hour, 12 people came in. Elderly women bought single items: a loaf of bread, a quart of milk, a can of soup. Local workers stopped in for cigarettes and energy drinks. A mother with a small child bought diapers and formula. But the most important things happened between the transactions. The elderly woman asked Mr. Joe about his wife's health. The night shift worker complained about his boss, and Mr. Joe listened patiently. The young mother asked if she could pay him back on payday, because her child was sick and she needed money for medicine. Mr. Joe knew everyone by name. He remembered that Mrs. Judy had diabetes and recommended sugar-free products. He knew that Andrew worked 3 shifts and saved fresh sandwiches for him. He gave the mother medicine on credit without a second thought. This wasn't a store. It was the heart of the neighborhood. The next day, Mary came to work with her notes. When the team gathered for their morning meeting, she presented her observations. "The data shows that neighborhood stores are losing customers," she began, "but I think we're misunderstanding the competition. These people don't go to supermarkets for the products. They go for the prices, but they come to neighborhood stores for something else." "For what?" Thomas asked. for understanding, for human connection, for someone to know their name. Maggie shook her head. That sounds very nice, but how do you measure that? How do you monetize it? Mary took a deep breath. What if these stores became local service hubs? They don't just sell bread, but they also accept packages for residents. They sell public transit passes, maybe even offer simple services. A photocopier, a document printer. Eve raised her eyebrows. That would mean a complete change to the business model, but it would leverage what they do best, their position in the neighborhood and the trust of the residents. Henry listened in silence. Finally, he nodded. Interesting. Please develop this into a full analysis. After the meeting, Mary was left alone in the room. She felt a sense of satisfaction, but also unease. Was she going too far? Were her ideas too simple? Beatrice walked into the room. This time, there was no fake smile. You think you're so smart, don't you? She said quietly. I think I'm trying to do a good job. A good job? Beatrice laughed, but it was a cold sound. Darling, this isn't a community club. This is a multi-million-dollar business. People here don't hire the daughters of grocery clerks. Mary felt the blood rush to her head. My mother isn't a grocery clerk. She works as a seamstress. Oh, I'm sorry. Beatrice feigned remorse. A seamstress. Big difference. Yes, a big difference, Mary replied with dignity. My mother knows how to create beautiful things from nothing. She knows how to fix what's broken, and she's never needed to put others down to feel important. Beatrice turned pale. Watch your words. My father is on the board of directors. I know. So what? For a moment they stood facing each other in silence, two young women from different worlds, fighting for the same place. You'll regret this conversation, Beatrice said finally, and walked out, her heels clicking. Mary was left alone in the empty conference room. Outside the window, New York City stretched out in the evening light, a city of contrasts, where concrete housing projects stood next to glass skyscrapers. She had just realized that her place in this company would depend not only on her competence, but on whether she could survive the war that had just been declared on her. But when she thought of her mother, who sat down at an old sewing machine every day and created beautiful things from scraps of fabric, she knew that she too could make great things from small opportunities. All it took was perseverance and belief in herself. That night, riding the bus through the city, Mary felt for the first time that she truly belonged here, not as an outsider, but as someone who had a place. A small place, perhaps a modest one, but her own. Chapter 4. The following week brought Mary her first real challenge. Henry called the entire team to a meeting with representatives from the neighborhood basket grocery chain, 3 men in navy suits, who looked at the young intern as if she were a museum curiosity. You will present our initial proposals, Henry said. Mary, you'll start. Her heart leaped into her throat. Presenting to the owners of the stores, to people who made decisions worth millions of dollars. She stood up on trembling legs and turned on the projector. The first slide appeared, the store as a community hub. Your stores are not just points of sale, she began, trying to keep her voice from shaking. They are places where people meet, exchange information, and build connections. One of the owners, a heavy-set man with a gold watch, rolled his eyes. Miss, we're not running a senior center, we're selling products. Mary felt her cheeks burn, but she continued. That's precisely why your profits are falling. Because you think you're selling products, but your customers are buying convenience, proximity, and trust. What exactly are you proposing? The second owner asked, his tone slightly softer. Local services, accepting package deliveries, selling transit passes, a small copy station. This generates additional foot traffic, and every extra customer is a potential sale. The third owner, the oldest of the 3, leaned forward with interest. That costs money. Who's going to pay for it? Mary took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. You will at first, but within 3 months it will pay for itself. People coming to pick up a package will buy a loaf of bread. Customers printing documents will grab a coffee. And most importantly, you will earn the loyalty of the neighborhood. The meeting lasted an hour. The owners asked questions, exchanged glances, and took notes. Finally, the oldest one stood up. This is an unconventional proposal, he said, but it makes sense. We'll give this concept a chance in 3 pilot stores. After they left, Henry walked over to Mary. You did well, but this is just the beginning. In 1 week, we present the detailed plan to their board. That will be the real test. That evening, Mary worked late, preparing a detailed cost-benefit analysis. She was sitting alone in the empty office under the light of a single lamp when she heard footsteps. It was Mrs. Sophia with her cleaning cart. Staying late again? She asked with concern. Child, that's not healthy. I have to prepare an important presentation, Mary explained. Mrs. Sophia sat down in a nearby chair. You know, I used to work in an office too, a long time ago back in the day, in a design firm. I also thought I had to work twice as hard to prove I deserved my spot. What happened? I burned out, ended up in the hospital, and when I came back, someone else had my job. Mrs. Sophia patted her hand. Don't make my mistake. Work smart, not hard. The next day, Mary arrived rested and ready, but a surprise was waiting on her desk, a thick folder labeled Urgent Review. Inside were documents in a foreign language, contracts with international suppliers full of convoluted legal clauses. A note attached to the folder was signed by Dr. King, legal and linguistic analysis due by tomorrow 9 a.m. Mary felt a cold sweat on her back. Her language skills were decent, but not for legal documents. This was a trap, a task she couldn't possibly do well, designed to prove she was unprepared. She started translating word by word, using online dictionaries. After 3 hours, she'd only finished 1 page out of 20. At this rate, she wouldn't be done by morning. Problems? Michael, the lawyer from Henry's team, stood behind her. A little, she admitted honestly. These documents are very complicated. Michael glanced at the papers and whistled softly. These are contracts with the biggest IT supplier in Europe. This is tough even for me. Who gave this to you? Dr. King. Michael frowned. That's strange. These documents already went through legal review a month ago. Why would they need to be analyzed again? Mary felt a pit in her stomach. Another attempt at sabotage. Could you help me? She asked uncertainly. Michael hesitated for a moment. Officially, I can't. That would be a breach of protocol, but I could stay at my desk late and happen to read similar documents out loud, coincidentally. That evening they sat together in the empty office. Michael, coincidentally, read aloud from similar contracts, explaining the complex clauses. Mary took notes and asked questions. After 4 hours, she had a finished analysis. Not perfect, perhaps, but solid. Why are you helping me? She asked as they packed up. Because a few years ago, I was an outsider too, he answered honestly. Son of a factory worker. First person in my family to go to college. I know what it's like to be among people who think you don't belong. The next morning, Dr. King was waiting for her analysis with the expression of a man preparing for an execution. When he read the document, his face showed first surprise, then frustration. This is quite competent, he admitted grudgingly, but the real test came that afternoon. Henry called the entire team for an emergency meeting. We have a crisis, he announced. We just received a tip that one of our competitors is making a similar proposal to the neighborhood basket. We have to present our concept earlier, tomorrow morning, instead of in a week. The room descended into chaos. Eve started reorganizing tasks. Thomas checked data, Maggie prepared slides. Mary sat in silence, feeling the overwhelming weight of responsibility. Mary, Henry said, your section on community connection is the foundation of the entire proposal. You will be presenting it to the board tomorrow. To the board, she choked out, to 10 people who will decide the future of this project, and likely your future at this company. That evening, Mary didn't go home. She stayed at the office preparing. Mrs. Sophia brought her sandwiches and tea in a thermos. Nervous? She asked in a motherly tone. Terrified. You know what, honey? I've been cleaning these offices for 20 years. I've seen hundreds of presentations. The best ones were given by people who talked about what they knew from life, not from books. At midnight, Henry returned to the office. He saw Mary at her computer, surrounded by notes and empty coffee cups. Why aren't you asleep? I'm afraid I'll fail, she answered honestly. Henry sat down across from her. Do you know what I like about your work? He asked. You don't pretend to know more than you do. Tomorrow, you don't have to be perfect. You have to be real. What if I make a mistake? What if I say something stupid? It will mean you're human. The board is made up of people who have also made mistakes. The key is not to be afraid of mistakes, but to learn from them. Henry stood up and headed for the door. Oh, and one more thing. Dr. King and Mr. Thompson, Beatrice's father, will be in the room tomorrow. They will be watching your every move, looking for a reason to attack. Remember that. When she was alone, Mary looked at her reflection in the dark computer screen. She saw a tired girl with dark circles under her eyes, but also something new, determination. Tomorrow she had a chance to prove that a girl from the projects could think just as well as a graduate from a prestigious university, and maybe even better. Chapter 5. Mary arrived at the office at 7 in the morning. She wanted to review her presentation one last time before the board meeting. When she turned on her computer, she noticed the files were arranged strangely. She opened the main presentation and felt the blood drain from her face. All the slides were scrambled. Data from different projects had been swapped. Her carefully crafted charts now showed absurd results. The stores were projected to lose millions of dollars. "Oh my God," she whispered, frantically checking other files. Everything was corrupted. Someone had accessed her computer and methodically destroyed her work. In 1 hour, she was scheduled to stand before the board. "Mary, what happened?" It was Eve, who had just arrived. Someone destroyed my presentation," Mary stammered. Eve looked at the screen and her face hardened. "This is sabotage. We have to tell Mr. Miller. But the meeting is in an hour. I don't have time to make a new one." At that moment, Mr. Williams entered the room with a file folder. "Good morning, ladies. Did either of you happen to misplace a copy of your materials?" He handed Mary a flash drive. "What is this?" "A backup of your presentation," he smiled mysteriously. "Last night when you were leaving, I thought to myself that data security is fundamental. I made a copy just in case." Mary could have kissed him. In 10 minutes she restored her work, but time was running out. Only half an hour remained. The boardroom was on the top floor. 12 leather chairs around a mahogany table, a view of the entire city, and an atmosphere so formal that Mary felt like she was taking her final exams. 10 board members sat in the chairs. She recognized Dr. King and an elegant man in his 60s. That had to be Mr. Thompson, Beatrice's father. Henry sat at the head of the table, his face betraying no emotion. "Ms. Smith," Dr. King said with cold politeness, "we've heard about your unconventional approach. We're curious." Mary stood up and turned on the projector. The first slide appeared on the screen, a photo of Mr. Joe's store, taken with her phone. "My name is Mary Smith, and I live in Queens," she began. "I know neighborhood stores not from reports, but from life." Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow ironically. "A very authentic approach." Mary felt a pang of anxiety, but she continued. "This store serves 1,000 residents in the neighborhood. The owner, Mr. Joe, knows every customer by name. He knows Mrs. Judy has diabetes, so he doesn't offer her sweets. He remembers that Mr. Andrew works the night shift, so he keeps fresh sandwiches for him." "That's very touching," Mr. Thompson interrupted. "But where's the business in that?" "That is the business," Mary answered confidently. "Mr. Joe has what the big box stores don't: trust and an intimate knowledge of his customers' needs. Our strategy isn't to fight the big chains, but to leverage that advantage." She showed the next slides: a cost analysis for introducing additional services, projected profits, an implementation timeline. The numbers were precise, but they were based on real observations. One of the board members, an older woman in an elegant suit, asked a question. "Have you studied other neighborhoods? Will this approach also work in the city center?" Mary felt more confident. This was a question she was prepared for. "Yes, I visited 10 stores in different parts of New York, in the Bronx, on Staten Island, in parts of Brooklyn. The pattern is the same everywhere. Stores that treat their customers like neighbors do better than those that treat them like numbers." "But how do you measure that?" pressed a young man in glasses. "How do you calculate the ROI on friendship?" Mary smiled for the first time during the presentation. "Very simply, customer loyalty. At Mr. Joe's store, 90% of the customers are regulars. At a supermarket, the average is 20%. The cost of acquiring a new customer is $100. The cost of keeping an old one is $2 for a smile and a kind word." The room relaxed. Some of the board members nodded in approval. Suddenly, the doors flew open. Beatrice entered holding a thick folder, her expression that of someone bearing crucial information. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said sweetly, "but I've discovered something important regarding this presentation." Henry frowned. "What is it?" Beatrice opened her folder and laid documents on the table. "These photos and observations that Ms. Smith is presenting as her own research are, in fact, plagiarized from another consulting firm's report. The report was published 3 months ago." Mary felt her world crumble. On the table were indeed similar photos of stores and similar conclusions. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I took those photos myself. I did the observations myself." "It sounds very convincing," Beatrice said with false sympathy. "But the facts are undeniable." Mr. Thompson smiled triumphantly. "Mr. Miller, this is a very serious accusation. Plagiarism is grounds for immediate termination." Mary felt tears pressing at her eyes. Was her career really going to end so quickly? Could someone be so ruthless? But suddenly Mr. Williams entered the room with another folder. "Please forgive me," he said calmly, "but I'm bringing the original documents from our archives." He laid different papers on the table. "These are photocopies of Ms. Smith's research from our system. Creation date, 2 weeks ago. And this," he pointed to Beatrice's documents, "is indeed plagiarism, but not by Mrs. Smith." Henry took the documents and checked the dates. "What are you trying to say?" That someone copied Mrs. Smith's original research and published it earlier under a different name, and then used that as proof of her plagiarism. A dead silence fell over the room. Mr. Thompson stared at the documents in disbelief. Dr. King sat motionless, like a statue. Henry looked at Beatrice with an icy gaze. "Do you have anything to add?" Beatrice opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide her pallor. It must have been a mistake." "A mistake?" Henry stood up. "Deliberately destroying a colleague's work and attempting to discredit her is a mistake." Mr. Thompson tried to salvage the situation. "Mr. Miller, my daughter certainly didn't mean to. Your daughter just tried to destroy the career of someone who works honestly." Henry cut him off. "There is no place for such behavior in my company." He turned to everyone present. Ms. Smith's presentation was thorough, innovative, and practical. We are adopting her concept. As for Ms. Thompson, she can take an extended leave of absence to reflect on her work methods. Beatrice left the room without a word, but the look she shot at Mary was filled with pure hatred. After the meeting, the other board members approached Mary with congratulations. The older woman in the suit squeezed her hand. "A very brave presentation, my dear, and a very necessary one." When the room emptied, only Henry and Mary remained. "You know this is just the beginning, right?" he asked. "Beatrice and her father won't forgive this defeat. Dr. King will also be looking for an opportunity." "I understand," Mary replied, "but is the alternative to give up?" Henry looked at her with approval. "No, the alternative is to fight, and I believe you have more strength in you than they think." That evening, Mary rode the bus home, feeling as if she had just survived a great battle. She had won, but the war was still ongoing. But for the first time she knew she had allies: Mr. Williams, Michael, Mrs. Sophia, and maybe even Henry Miller himself. And most importantly, she had something they never would: a true story to tell. Chapter 6. The Monday after the gala brought unexpected news. Henry summoned the entire team to his office, his expression grave. "We have a problem," he announced. "Someone has leaked the details of our project for the neighborhood basket to the competition. Golden Circle Consulting is submitting an identical proposal tomorrow morning." Eve went pale. "That's impossible. All the documents were secure." "Apparently not all of them," Henry replied dryly. "And what's worse, their bid is 20% lower. The client is reconsidering their decision." Mary felt her stomach clench into a knot. Was her first great success about to turn into a failure? "What can we do?" Thomas asked. "We have 24 hours to prove that our proposal is not only better, but impossible for the competition to replicate." After the meeting, the team threw themselves into their work with desperation. But Mary couldn't focus. Something about the situation felt wrong. Who had access to all the documents? Who could have passed them to the competition? During her lunch break, she ran into Mr. Williams in the elevator. "I heard about the trouble," he said quietly. "It's sad when people put their own interests above the good of the company." "What do you mean?" Mr. Williams looked around and leaned closer. "I stayed late in the archives after the gala last night. I was organizing some old files. Around midnight, someone came into the main office. I thought it was security, but it was Miss Thompson, with a flash drive at the computer in Mr. Miller's assistant's office." Mary felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you sure?" "Very sure. And I have the security camera footage." That evening, Mary, Mr. Williams, and Michael met in the empty office. On the computer screen, they watched the grainy footage from the hallway camera. Sure enough, there was Beatrice entering the executive assistant's office at 12:30 in the morning. "This is proof," Michael said, "but we have to be careful. Mr. Thompson has a lot of influence in this company." "What if we don't have to do anything?" Mary asked. "What if they expose themselves?" The next day at 8 a.m., Mary came to the office with a new plan. Instead of fighting the competition on their terms, she decided to leverage something they couldn't copy: authentic human relationships. She called Mr. Joe. "Mr. Joe, could you come to our office today with a couple of your regular customers? I'd like them to talk about what they really need from a store." Mr. Joe was surprised, but he agreed. At 10 o'clock, he arrived with Mrs. Judy and Mr. Andrew, an elderly retired couple who had been shopping at his store for years. When the representatives from the neighborhood basket arrived to discuss the competing offer from Golden Circle, they found not only Henry's team in the conference room, but also 3 real customers from a neighborhood store. "Gentlemen," Henry said, "before you make your decision, we'd like you to hear the perspective of those for whom we are creating our solutions." Mr. Joe stood up shyly. "Good morning. I've been running a small store for 15 years, and I'd like to say that what Ms. Smith is proposing isn't just business. It's an understanding that people don't just need bread, they need bread with a heart." Mrs. Judy nodded. "This young lady came to our store not to judge us, but to listen to us. It was the first time anyone asked us what we really needed. Mr. Andrew added, "Other companies come with computers and calculate how much we spend. She came and asked why we spend it here and not at the supermarket." The CEO of the neighborhood basket listened with growing interest. "And what was the answer?" "Because here, we're people, not customers," Mr. Joe replied. "He remembers that my wife has diabetes. He remembers that I prefer dark bread. And when I'm short on cash before my pension check arrives, he doesn't tell me to find an ATM, he just writes it down in a notebook." The chain's owners looked moved. The CEO stood up and walked over to Mary. "Could you prepare a report on how this model is performing in practice in the 3 pilot stores?" "I already have it," Mary answered, handing him the documents. "Data from the last 2 weeks. Everything is up. Revenue, customer count, and their satisfaction." The CEO scanned the papers and looked at his director. "These aren't just numbers. These are real results." After a moment of thought, he turned to Henry. "Mr. Miller, we're sticking with your proposal. This human perspective is something no amount of money can buy." When the guests had left, only the team members remained. Henry walked over to Mary. "How did you know that would work?" "Because it wasn't a trick," she answered honestly. "It was real people telling the truth about their real needs." At that moment, Dr. King burst into the room, looking like a man bearing tragic news. "Mr. Miller, I have some very disturbing information regarding our data security." Henry looked at him coldly. "Alexander, does this have to do with yesterday's leak to the competition?" "Yes, we've discovered the source of the leak." Dr. King looked at Mary. "Unfortunately, all signs point to Ms. Smith." The silence was crushing. Mary felt her heart stop. "That's not true," she whispered. "We have proof," Dr. King said, laying documents on the table. "Computer logs show that the last person to access the confidential files was someone from your account." Mary stared at the papers in disbelief. It was true. Her login was listed as the last one before the leak. "But I didn't." Just then, Mr. Williams entered the room with a folder and a calm expression. "Pardon me, but I have some documents that might clarify this matter." He placed a flash drive and the security camera footage on the table. "This is a recording from the night after the gala. It shows the person who was using the computer in the executive suite, with access to all employee passwords." He played the recording. The blurry image showed a figure at a computer. When the person turned toward the camera, everyone recognized the face of Beatrice Thompson. Dr. King's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. "That's not all," Mr. Williams continued. "This flash drive contains copies of all the files that were copied that night, including the procedure for logging into other employees' accounts." Henry took the flash drive and checked its contents. His face hardened with each passing minute. "Alexander," he said finally, "did you know about these activities?" "No, of course not." Dr. King was visibly terrified. "But you didn't check for alternative explanations before you accused Ms. Smith." The evidence was fabricated," Henry interrupted, "and you accepted it without verification because it fit your preconceived notions." He turned to the entire team. "Beatrice Thompson is terminated immediately for sabotage and data theft. As for Dr. King, we will be reviewing his position at this company." Mary sat in silence, feeling both relief and sadness. She had won, but at what cost? How many people had lost their jobs because of her presence at the firm? As if reading her thoughts, Henry moved closer. "You don't feel victorious, do you?" "No, I feel like I've ruined other people's lives." "You didn't ruin them," he answered gently. "They chose to fight instead of cooperate. You only revealed their true character." A month later, Mary was still working as an intern. She hadn't been promoted to a management position, she hadn't made a fortune, and she hadn't become a business legend. But she had become something more important, a respected member of the team, a person whose opinions were taken into account, a woman who had proven that where you come from doesn't determine your worth. The neighborhood store project became the firm's flagship success. 30 stores implemented the new model, and their profits grew by an average of 40%. Mary traveled all over the country, helping owners understand their customers. Henry invited her to more strategy meetings, but he always maintained a professional distance. Sometimes, though, when they were working late on projects, Mary would catch his gaze and see more than just professional respect in it. One evening, as she was finishing up, Henry asked her out for coffee. "Do you have plans for the future?" he asked, as they sat in a small cafe near the office. "I'd like to go to college," she answered honestly. "Night school so I can keep working. Business or management." "Why?" "You already know more about business than most graduates." "Because I want to understand the theory behind what I'm doing in practice. I want to be better." Henry smiled. "That's a very good approach. And have Have you considered staying with the company permanently after your internship? Mary looked him in the eye. Do I have a chance? You have something better than a chance. You have talent and character, and in business, those are the most valuable assets. When she returned to her apartment in Queens that evening, her mother was waiting with tea and a smile. How was it? Good, Mom. Very good. I can see it in your eyes. They're different, more confident. Mary sat down next to her mother and told her everything about the sabotage, the successes, the people who helped her, and those who tried to destroy her. You know what, honey? Christine said when she had finished. The most important thing isn't that you won against the people who wanted to destroy you. The most important thing is that you didn't become like them. What do you mean? You could have gotten revenge on Beatrice. You could have humiliated Dr. King the way they humiliated you. But you didn't. You stayed true to yourself. The next day, Mary came to the office with renewed energy. On her desk was a letter from a consulting firm in Boston, a job offer with a higher salary and a management position. Henry noticed her contemplating the documents. A tempting offer? Very, but here I have more than a position. I have a place. I have people who respect me for who I am, not for where I come from. Henry nodded with approval. That's a wise decision. But there's one condition. What's that? You'll start night classes. The company will cover the costs. And for the next 3 years, you'll be my personal assistant for local development. Mary felt her heart beat faster. Your personal assistant? If you'll accept. That day, as she was leaving the office, Mary passed Mr. Joe, who had come in with a report from his pilot store. His eyes were twinkling like a child's. Mary, you wouldn't believe it. For the past 2 weeks, twice as many people have been coming in, and not just to shop. Mrs. Judy spent the whole afternoon here yesterday, waiting for a package and drank 3 coffees, and that young mom with the baby prints her husband's resume here and buys something for the little one every time. That's wonderful. But the most important thing is that I feel needed again, not just as a shopkeeper, but as part of the neighborhood. As Mary rode home that evening, she looked at New York City with different eyes. She was no longer just a girl from the projects dreaming of a better life. She was a woman who had found her place in a world where talent mattered more than pedigree. She didn't become the CEO of the company. She didn't make millions. But she gained something more valuable, the certainty that her voice mattered. Her ideas were heard, and her work was changing the lives of real people. And when she thought about the look in Henry's eyes when he offered her a permanent job, she knew that her story was just beginning. In a city of contrasts, she had found her place, not at the top, not at the bottom, but right where it mattered most, between the people who needed help and those who could provide it. And in Queens, in Mr. Joe's small store, a business card lay on the counter. Mary Smith, specialist in local development, Miller and King Consulting. The first business card of her life. The first, but certainly not the last.